briefly talk about how we rethought the classroom, how we move from the classrooms that have been used for thousands of years to something different and new, using technology that makes it possible to teach in a revolutionary new way. And I have to give special thanks for funding from the Dean of Arts and Sciences at Jacksonville State University. If we're going to understand the classroom, we need to understand the origins of the classroom. And the classroom actually goes back to ancient Greece. And it was in ancient Greece that they started to teach students in classes. The Greeks thought this was very important, and they preserved how they taught students with images that they put onto their vases and other things. And you can see from this image that, wait, what is that? Do the students of Greece have laptops long before us? No, they didn't have laptops. The students of Greece had tablets, and the tablets had covers on them. And the students would sit in rows and listen to the words that came from the elder, all the wisdom that he had, and they would write this down on their tablets and keep it very, very secure. And that is how they learned. It was this idea that the elder had all the information and orally passed it down to the student, and the students transcribed that information. This not only occurred in Greece, but this also occurred in ancient Egypt, where the elders sat and either spoke or read to the students, and the students sat and listened to those words of wisdom. So wisdom was always transmitted from the elder to the students through some sort of oral way. In India, the same thing happened. Students would listen to the instructor who gave them the important lessons at the beginning. Even back into Mesopotamia, the students sat and listened to the oral instructions coming from the teacher. And when these students were sitting in the classroom, there wasn't a whole lot of attention paid upon the comfort of the students. Sometimes they were given rocks to sit on. If we go forward a few thousand years and we come to a 20th century classroom, we can see that it's a bit different, but in many ways it is the exact same classroom that they had back in ancient Greece. The students are sitting in rows and columns. They're sitting at desks that are not particularly comfortable. There's some sort of uniformity that the instructor likes to put in the classroom, and the students pick this information up from the instructor orally. They write it down, and then they have to present that back to the instructor. Even if we look into a more modern lecture hall, it's the same technique of the instructor standing up in front of the classroom, the instructor giving this information orally to the students. The students in some way or another are uniform. They're placed in rows and columns, and they listen to all the pearls of wisdom that is handed to them from the instructor. When I walked into a classroom at Jacksonville State University, this is the kind of classroom that I saw. This classroom has chairs fixed to the desk so things stay very nice and neat in rows and columns, and the students each sit isolated, listening to the instructor to take in information. And if I were to come up with words to describe this particular classroom, they would not be complimentary words that one would want to use to describe a classroom. Instead, they would be words that you shouldn't use to describe a classroom. So in taking and saying how to rebuild this classroom, took everything out of the classroom, everything, down to the bare walls, and took the off-white walls and darkened them. I painted them a dark color to make a warmth and friendliness to the room. And then the bright windows that kind of, attracted your attention, I took and covered with wooden Venetian blinds to make them to be less important a part of the room. And then what I put into the room, which was very important, is I took, instead of putting the desk back into the room, I put tables into the room. Why tables? Because the students should sit around a table and be encouraged to talk with one another and to interact while working on projects. And it doesn't say that you have to teach students with group projects. You can teach students with individual items that they have to do. But while they're working on their individual item, they should have somebody that they can talk to. We do this all the time when we're eating. We're sitting around a table, we're all eating our own meal, but we're talking to somebody, we're interacting with people, we're sharing ideas, we're learning from each other. And that should be happening in the classroom. And so all this great stuff that we do around the dinner table, we should be doing every bit in our classroom. And then to make this room inviting to the students and make sure that they don't have to sit on rocks, put in comfortable chairs to acknowledge that students, you want to have them there. They want to be there. It's not someplace that they have to be and they have to come to. Now, if the students are all facing in different directions, you can't put a whiteboard on one side of the room and have the instructor stand at that whiteboard. So instead, we use the same approach they use at sports bars. We put a television on every wall. That way, no matter what direction the student is facing, they can see the television and they can participate in their group while watching what's happening in the presentation. If you have a single screen up and the students have to cricket that, then you've broken that table. Students are no longer looking at each other in the face. They're all, if anything, they're looking at the backs of another student's head. And that's not helpful. Now, this, of course, is something that hasn't been possible before. It's now, with the price of flat screen TVs being low enough and have large enough TVs, we can actually put them in and very easily wire them that they can all project the same image. Now I also got rid of the office lighting. I turned off the overhead lights and put lamps in the room, put floor lamps in the corners, added table lamps on the tables. And this tones down the room. This not only makes the room more inviting, warmer, more friendly feeling, but it also makes the television stand out more. The televisions now become the center of focus. They're the bright lights with different colors that are moving around on the wall. The next thing we did with the classroom was we took and put power strips onto every table. If we have power going to the table for a table lamp, we might as well put a power strip on the table so that the students can plug in their laptops, their iPads, their iPhones, whatever they have that's going to help them with their learning. And finally, the last thing we did was we decorated with class. We didn't just hang paper up, we hung up framed pictures so that the room looked like a room that you wanted to be in. It looked better than a student dorm room. It looked better than a student apartment, so that the students would want to spend time in the room and not want to spend time at their apartment. And this was our collaborative classroom. So recall, this is the classroom that I started out with. I took this classroom, I gutted it, I completely took everything out, I changed it according to those plans I showed you, and these are the results of what we have for our collaborative classroom. You'll see here in the next few slides, I'll just scan around the room, that the televisions are mounted on the walls. They are the most important thing. We use 3 televisions on 4 walls, sort of in a triangular configuration that can be viewed by all the students in the room. There are floor lamps in the corners. There are table lamps on each of the tables. There are nice framed pictures. This is in particular a science geography classroom, and so the pictures in that all correspond to those sorts of topics. And there was one thing that I had to add to the room that wasn't in my initial plan, and that comes in. You can see that here. It's a small TV table that I put into the room to store the electronics and hide all the wires so that there is a great deal of technology that's in the background of this room, but the technology doesn't stand out in front. It's not what's supposed to be out in front. It's student learning, student comfort that should be out in front. And so this is my one little place that I hid all that stuff. And you'll also notice around this room that there is no place for the instructor to hide. There is no desk for the instructor to be behind, that the instructor is out in front and working among the students and not standing over the students and saying in one direction, saying, here I am with all my information. I am working with you to help you to learn. Now there is technology, as I said, behind all this, and the enabling technology that's behind all of this, one of the key elements that we had, perhaps the key element, was using an iPad with Apple TV. And using the airtime, one can untether the instructor. One can take your iPad and make presentations to the classroom, and you're wirelessly connected into the TVs, and what you have displaying on your iPad is displayed on the TVs for the students to learn from. If you need a whiteboard, you simply bring up the whiteboard app on your iPad, and then you can write on it, and each of the TVs becomes a whiteboard with all of your notes being written on it for all the students to see. And you can go to whiteboard apps, back to slide presentations, showing your videos, what have you, as you need to during your presentation and interacting with your students. We've also included into the room a Windows tablet for those apps that will only work on Windows. Right now, the Windows tablet is tethered to the system. We are working with a way to come up with HDMI over IP to get rid of that tether, but right now we do have the tether in. We also added a camera. It was actually mounted up on one of the walls, and this is a remotely operated camera that you can, as an instructor, you can turn on, and you can use this to show live demonstrations, or if you think that the students need a headshot of you on all the TVs, you can show that as well. When you're doing these changes in the classroom, you can't be concentrating on the changes, you must be concentrating on teaching. So all the changes have to be made one button simple. And we used a programmable remote that we could just push one button to change whether you want the iPad to be displaying, whether you want the tablet to be displaying, or whether you want the camera to be displaying. That's just can be transferred back and forth with pushing of a single button. We do have some ideas for future capabilities. We're not done with this classroom yet. We're doing much more to it. Some of the future capabilities are that we want to take and we're going to mic the room and be able to record the presentations, what's going over the TVs versus what's being said in the classroom. Therefore, we could make vodcast or video podcasts that students who happen to miss the presentation, they can actually view later on their iPhone or iPad or their laptop computer those podcasts of what they missed. And those lessons are then can be for them and enhancing a more flexible learning schedule for all the students in the classroom. In addition to that, we'd like to have that every student in the room has an iPad. And as the instructor, I would have an iPad with an app that I can control which student's iPad would be displayed on the TVs. So I could say, Jim, show us your drawing for this particular problem. Or Jane, show us the first steps that you're going to do after the drawing to start solving this problem. Jim, come back, do the next 3 steps. David, what's wrong with what Jim did? And then I can put all these students being active learners, participants in the classroom, and not passive learners where they're only sitting and listening. This is our collaborative classroom. I thank you very much for listening. We're very excited about it. It's something I am sure is going to enhance student learning. It is definitely something students have liked. Their response has been very, very positive to it, and I do have to acknowledge that I had help from lots of people in creating this classroom. Thank you very much.